6 girls, 6 daughters and not 1 son. You bring shame to this house.
It is not my fault, I swear it.
Wanted Daughters is a powerful emotional drama that exposes the painful cost of patriarchy, favoritism, and the desperate hunger for a male child. In a home ruled by tradition and cruelty, 4 daughters and their faithful mother are treated as nothing, until hidden secrets, prophetic dreams, and a long-buried son shake the family to its core. As pride clashes with truth and love battles shame, the girls must rise to prove that destiny is not defined by gender. Deeply moving, suspenseful, and culturally rich, this story will keep you glued from the first minute to the very end. Morning came quietly, the kind of quiet that felt forced, like a held breath. The sun rose over the Hale compound, spilling pale gold through the thin curtains of the kitchen. Grace Hale stood over the gas stove, gently stirring a pot of porridge. Her movements were careful, practiced, and calm, but her eyes told a different story. They were tired in a way sleep could not fix. She set the table for 6 plates, 6 spoons, 6 cups, 4 daughters, 1 husband, 1 heart that felt like it was breaking a little more every day. "Breakfast is ready," Grace called softly, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Her voice carried hope, the kind that refused to die even after years of disappointment. From the bedroom came the sharp scrape of a chair and heavy footsteps. Kenneth Hale emerged already dressed, his face hardened like stone. He glanced at the table and frowned as though the food itself offended him. "I didn't ask you to make breakfast," he said flatly. Grace paused. "You haven't eaten since last night." "I thought." "You thought," Kenneth snapped. "That's your problem. Always thinking when you should just listen." The girls had gone quiet. Sophia, the eldest, froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Ella lowered her eyes. Alina leaned back in her chair, jaw tightening. Little Naomi clutched her cup with both hands, confused by the tension she had grown too used to. "There is no we here," Kenneth continued, pacing slowly. "All I see are girls. Girls everywhere. This house is like a factory that only knows how to produce females." Grace swallowed. "Kenneth, please. Why can't you give me a son?" he exploded. "Is it too much to ask? Just 1 boy, 1 heir, 1 proof that I am a man." Sophia stood up abruptly. "Dad, that's not fair." Kenneth turned sharply. "Sit down." "No," Sophia said, her voice shaking but firm. "You don't get to talk to Mom like that. Or to us." The air thickened. Even the walls seemed to listen. "What did you just say?" Kenneth asked slowly. "I said a real father protects his family," Sophia continued. "He doesn't destroy them with words." Kenneth laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Protect? What am I protecting? Useless children. Female children who will grow up, marry, and belong to another man's house." Grace rushed forward. "Kenneth, stop. They're just children." "Children." He pointed at them one by one. "These are curses. Every single one of them." That was when Naomi started crying. Grace pulled her youngest into her arms, tears finally spilling over. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't say that. They are blessings." Kenneth scoffed. "Blessings? You call this blessing?" He turned away, grabbing his keys. "Do what is right before it's too late." The door slammed behind him. Silence followed, heavy, crushing silence. Sophia clenched her fists. "Did you hear him? He called us cursed." Grace forced a smile through her tears. "You are not cursed. None of you are. But he hates us," Alina muttered, her eyes dark. "And he hates you even more." Grace knelt, pulling all 4 girls close. "Listen to me. Do not let hatred turn your hearts bitter. We will survive this, with grace and love." Alina looked away. Later that night, the house slept uneasily. The girls shared whispers in their room while the corridor outside lay dim and still. Grace returned to the marital bedroom, still hoping for peace. Kenneth was already lying on the bed. "I want to sleep alone," he said without looking at her. Grace stood frozen. We've shared this bed for years. And tonight you won't, he replied. Get out. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. Sophia saw her mother enter their room, trying to smile. Dad kicked you out, didn't he? Grace shook her head. No, my love. I just wanted to be with you. Alina sat up. He's gone too far. Alina, Grace warned gently. But Alina's eyes burned. Words don't work on people like him. That night, while the house slept, something shifted. Kenneth tossed and turned, sweat soaking his sheets. His dreams twisted. Shadows crawling, masked figures chasing him through endless darkness. He ran, breathless, terrified, until something struck him hard across the back. He screamed. Kenneth jolted awake, gasping. His body trembled as he reached back. His fingers brushed something wet. Blood. The next morning, Grace noticed the mark while Kenneth dressed. What happened to your back? She asked. Kenneth avoided the mirror. Just a nightmare. A nightmare did this, Grace whispered. Before she could say more, a knock echoed through the house. Your mother is coming, Kenneth said quietly, fear flickering across his face. In the girls' room, Ella sat up suddenly, her breath uneven. I saw it, she whispered. This is only the beginning. Outside, a car pulled into the compound, and with it came the storm. Margaret Hale arrived the way harm often did, without apology and without warning. Her car stopped at the center of the compound, engine humming like it owned the ground beneath it. The driver rushed to open the door, but she stepped out before he could fully bow, adjusting her headscarf with the authority of a woman who had never learned how to ask. Grace stood at the doorway, hands folded tightly in front of her. Her smile was polite, respectful, and painfully practiced. Welcome, Mama, she said. Margaret's eyes swept over her from head to toe. You've grown thinner, she replied. Or maybe stress is finally catching up with you. Kenneth forced a laugh as he stepped forward. Mama, welcome. You didn't tell us you were coming today. Do I need permission to visit my son? Margaret snapped. Or is this house no longer mine? She brushed past Grace without acknowledgement. From the hallway, the girls watched in silence. That's her, Alina muttered. The beginning of the worst. Ella's face had gone pale. Since dawn, her head throbbed with images she couldn't shake. Shadows behind smiles, laughter hiding knives. Margaret entered the sitting room and sat like a queen reclaiming a throne. So, she said loudly, where are they? Kenneth hesitated. Who? My grandchildren. Or should I say, the evidence of your failure? Grace's breath caught. Call them, Margaret commanded. The girls lined up, 4 in a row. Margaret counted them slowly, clicking her tongue. 1, 2, 3, 4, she said. Still no boy. Sophia lifted her chin. Good afternoon, Grandma. Margaret ignored her. Grace, she said sharply. How many times must a woman try before she realizes she is not blessed? Grace said nothing. At the dining table later, plates of food were served. Margaret watched as Grace placed food before the girls. Why are they sitting here? Margaret asked. This is their home, Grace replied quietly. Margaret laughed. Home. Girls have no home. They only pass through. Alina pushed her chair back slightly. We are not trash. The room froze. Kenneth shot to his feet. Alina. Margaret's eyes narrowed. So this is how you raise them now. To talk back to elders. Sophia stood. We are your grandchildren. You don't get to humiliate us. Kenneth's hand slammed onto the table. Enough. All of you take your food to the kitchen. Grace shook her head slowly. No. Everyone turned to her. No. Kenneth echoed. They will eat here, Grace said, her voice trembling but firm. Or I will not eat at all. For a moment no one spoke. Then Margaret scoffed. You've grown bold. I've grown tired, Grace replied softly. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide open. When she finally closed them, the vision came again. She saw a woman walking into their house with a beautiful smile. Everyone welcomed her. Laughter filled the rooms. But behind her eyes was darkness, thick, swirling, alive. Grace cried every day in the vision, her tears soaking the floor. Then the woman turned on Kenneth and Margaret, and the house shook. Ella gasped awake. She rushed to her mother's room, finding Grace praying quietly on the floor. "Mom," Ella whispered urgently. "I saw it again." Grace looked up. "What did you see?" "A stranger," Ella said. "She will come smiling. But she will bring destruction. Please be careful." Grace cupped her daughter's face. "Not every dream is danger, my love. But this one is," Ella insisted. "My visions never lie." Grace kissed her forehead. "We will be careful." Across the house, Kenneth sat alone, staring at the mirror. The mark on his back had darkened. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt watched. He poured himself a drink, hands shaking. "Get a grip," he muttered. But fear had already planted itself deep in his chest. The following day, Margaret cornered Kenneth in the courtyard. "You look weak," she said. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing," Kenneth lied. "You have a son somewhere," Margaret continued suddenly. "I can feel it. A man does not carry this much frustration without leaving a seed." Kenneth stiffened. Margaret smiled slowly. "Find him." That evening, Kenneth's phone rang. The name on the screen made his heart drop. "Rita." He didn't answer at first. Then the phone rang again. "Hello," he said quietly. "It's time," Rita replied calmly. "Our son wants to meet you." The world tilted. Inside the house, Ella stopped mid-step. "It has begun," she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, even though the sky was clear. And the storm drew closer. Kenneth did not sleep that night. He sat at the edge of the bed long after Grace had drifted into a restless sleep beside the girls. The house felt unfamiliar now, as though something invisible had crossed its threshold and refused to leave. Every sound, the creak of wood, the rustle of leaves outside, made his heart jump. Rita's voice echoed in his mind. "Our son wants to meet you, son." The word filled him with a rush of emotions he could not untangle. Relief, fear, guilt, pride. For years he had cursed fate, blamed his wife, his daughters, even God. And now, suddenly, the thing he believed would save his dignity existed. But at what cost? The next morning, Kenneth avoided Grace's eyes. He barely spoke during breakfast. Margaret, however, was unusually cheerful. "You look distracted, my son," she said, sipping her tea. "Good things require preparation." Grace frowned. "What good things?" Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "You will know soon enough." Ella felt it then, a tightening in her chest like a warning bell. She glanced at Alina, who sat stiffly, jaw clenched. Something was coming. That afternoon, a car pulled into the compound. Sophia was the first to see it. She peered through the window and stiffened. "Mom," she called softly. "Someone's here." Grace stepped outside, wiping her hands on her wrapper. The woman who stepped out of the car was elegant, confident. Her clothes were simple but expensive, her posture relaxed. She smiled as though she belonged there. "Good afternoon," the woman said. "My name is Rita." Grace felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Kenneth emerged slowly, as though walking toward judgment. His face drained of color. "Rita," he said. Margaret rushed out immediately, her eyes lighting up. "Ah, so this is her." Grace turned sharply. "Kenneth." Rita's smile never faltered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said calmly. "But your husband stopped taking my calls. I had no choice but to come." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "Taking your calls, about what?" Rita turned toward the car. "Come out, Daniel." A boy stepped forward. He was about 12, tall for his age, with sharp eyes that seemed far too observant. He looked at Kenneth without excitement, without anger. Just quiet curiosity. "My son," Rita said. "Daniel." The The silence was unbearable. Grace felt her knees weaken. Your son. Kenneth opened his mouth, then closed it again. Margaret broke into loud laughter. Thank you, God, she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Finally, son. I knew it. Grace stared at Kenneth, waiting for denial, for explanation. He looked away. That means it's true, she whispered. Sophia stepped forward instinctively. Dad! Kenneth's voice came out hoarse. It was before the girls were born. I didn't know. I thought the pregnancy was ended. Rita raised an eyebrow. You asked me to end it, she corrected calmly. I chose not to. Grace's breath hitched. She pressed a hand to her chest as if her heart might fall out. You betrayed me, she said quietly. Margaret cut in sharply. Enough of this drama. What matters is that there is a son now. A son. Alina snapped. So that excuses everything. Margaret turned on her. Watch your mouth. No, Sophia said, standing beside her sister. You don't get to celebrate while destroying our mother. Kenneth slammed his hand against the wall. Enough. Daniel flinched slightly, his eyes darting, then settled on Alina. For a moment the world narrowed to that gaze. Something passed between them. Recognition. Curiosity. Daniel smiled faintly. Alina's skin prickled. Ella, standing behind them, felt cold spread through her veins. He doesn't come alone, she whispered to Naomi. Something followed him. That evening Rita and Daniel were invited inside. Grace sat quietly in the corner, holding her daughters close. Kenneth avoided her gaze. Margaret moved around the house like a victorious general. This room will do for you, Margaret said to Rita. This house finally has an heir. Grace stood abruptly. This is still my home. Margaret sneered. Not for long. That night, Grace cried silently while her daughters held her. We won't let you fall, Sophia whispered. Alina stared at the ceiling, her fists clenched. If they think this changes anything, she murmured, they are wrong. In the guest room, Daniel sat on the bed, staring at the walls. He closed his eyes and smiled. Somewhere in the house a candle flickered, then went out. Ella jolted awake. The house has been crossed, she whispered. And the darkness settled in. The house no longer slept. Even at dawn, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes swollen from crying through the night. The warmth that once lived in her home had thinned into something fragile, easily shattered by a raised voice or a careless word. In the guest room, Rita moved confidently, already arranging her things as though she had always belonged there. Daniel sat quietly on the bed, his back straight, his hands folded. He observed everything. The sounds of footsteps, the way doors opened and closed, the unspoken tension that vibrated through the walls. Margaret walked into the room smiling. My son's son, she said proudly. You are welcome here. Daniel nodded politely. Thank you, Grandma. Margaret turned to Rita. You did well. You saved this family. Rita smiled faintly but said nothing. In the kitchen, Grace stirred a pot she no longer cared about. Sophia entered quietly. Mom, she said softly, you don't have to do this. Grace sighed. Life doesn't pause because the heart is wounded. Ella stepped in next, her face pale. Mom, something is wrong. Very wrong. Alina crossed her arms. We already know that. No, Ella said firmly. This is deeper. The boy, he carries something with him. Alina scoffed. Everyone here carries something. But later that day, strange things began to happen. Doors closed on their own. Whispers echoed when no one was speaking. Kenneth felt a growing pressure in his chest, like guilt tightening its grip. Every time he looked at Grace, shame burned through him, but pride kept his mouth shut. Margaret, however, grew bolder. At lunch, she addressed Grace without even looking at her. Now that there is a son, things will change. This house needs proper order. Grace slowly placed her spoon down. What does that mean? It means priorities, Margaret replied. A man's legacy comes first. Sophia stood. And what about us? Margaret finally looked at her. You are girls. You will marry and leave. That doesn't make us nothing, Sophia said. Margaret laughed. You think strength lives in softness. Before Grace could speak, Alina stepped forward. You talk about strength like you understand it, Alina said calmly. But you don't. Margaret's eyes flashed. You are very bold for a girl who should know her place. My place is right here, Alina replied. And I won't be silent. Kenneth stood abruptly. Alina, stop it. No, Grace said suddenly. Everyone turned. Grace stood, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I have been quiet for too long. I carried children in pain, raised them with love, endured shame I did not deserve. And still I stayed. Kenneth stared at her, stunned. You wanted a son so badly, Grace continued, that you destroyed the hearts of the daughters you already had. Silence filled the room. Daniel watched her closely. I will not leave this house, Grace said. And I will not allow my children to be treated as less than human. Margaret scoffed. You are forgetting yourself. Grace shook her head. No. I am finally remembering myself. That night, Ella dreamed again. She saw the house shaking not from destruction but from truth. She saw Margaret standing alone, powerless. She saw Kenneth on his knees, not begging for a son but forgiveness. And she saw her mother standing tall, surrounded by light. Ella woke up calm. The following morning, Kenneth collapsed in the courtyard, clutching his chest. Panic erupted. Rita stepped back, fear flashing across her face. Call a doctor, Grace shouted. As Kenneth lay there, gasping, his eyes locked onto Grace's. I'm sorry, he whispered. Tears streamed down Grace's face, but she nodded. Margaret stood frozen, fear creeping into her pride. Daniel watched silently. Later, as Kenneth recovered, the house shifted, not magically but emotionally. The truth could no longer be ignored. Rita made her decision that evening. I didn't come to destroy, she said to Grace quietly. But I won't stay where hatred lives. She left with Daniel. Margaret followed soon after, her power finally broken by reality. Days passed. Peace returned slowly, carefully. One evening, Grace sat with her daughters under the fading sun. We were never unwanted, Sophia said softly. Grace smiled through tears. No, you were always the blessing. Alina leaned back, finally relaxed. Let the world learn that. And in the quiet that followed, the house breathed again, not with fear but with healing. The daughters who were once unwanted stood tall. And they were finally seen.